Years passed, and Henry Calloway's farmhouse transformed into a lively, chaotic haven filled with the sounds of laughter, running feet, and endless chatter. The once quiet fields were now dotted with makeshift play areas, swings tied to tree branches, a sandbox near the barn, and colorful chalk drawings on the driveway. Lily, Samuel, and Emma had grown into spirited toddlers, each with their own distinct personality that kept Henry on his toes. Life was anything but predictable, but it was beautiful. Lily, the bold one, loved exploring every inch of the farm. She could often be found chasing chickens or climbing hay bales, her curly hair bouncing as she giggled mischievously. Samuel, thoughtful and observant, preferred quieter activities like stacking blocks or flipping through picture books. He adored helping Henry in the garden, carefully watering plants with a tiny watering can. Emma, the sweetest of the trio, followed Henry everywhere, clutching his hand tightly whenever they ventured outside. Her favorite spot was perched on his shoulders, where she'd point excitedly at birds flying overhead or cows grazing in the distance. Henry marveled at how quickly time flew by. What had once felt overwhelming now seemed natural. Mornings began with breakfast chaos, spilled milk, sticky fingers, and arguments over who got the red sippy cup. Afternoons were spent teaching the kids about farm life, feeding the animals, planting seeds, or simply watching clouds drift across the sky. Evenings ended with bedtime stories, their small voices begging for just one more, before finally drifting off to sleep. Though exhausting, these routines brought him immense joy. Every hug, every toothy grin, reminded him why he had fought so hard to keep them. The scars of their early days lingered faintly, but they no longer defined the triplets. With the love and support of Henry and the entire town, they thrived. Teachers praised their curiosity and kindness during weekly visits from a local preschool program. Neighbors continued to dote on them, bringing treats or stopping by just to see how they were growing. Maplewood had truly become their extended family, and Henry made sure the children knew how lucky they were to have such a caring community around them. One crisp autumn morning, nearly 3 years after discovering the triplets under the oak tree, Henry took them to that very spot. The old tree stood tall, its golden leaves shimmering in the sunlight. He knelt down beside them, holding their hands as he explained what had happened on that fateful day. "This is where I found you," he said softly. "You were so tiny then, but look at you now. You're my whole world." Emma tilted her head curiously. "Why did someone leave us here?" she asked innocently. Henry hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people go through hard times and make tough choices," he replied. "But your mama wanted you to be safe, and she trusted me to take care of you, and I'm so glad she did." Samuel hugged Henry tightly. "We're happy here," he said simply. It was all Henry needed to hear. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, hand in hand, Henry couldn't help but smile. His life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, late nights, and moments of doubt. But it was full of purpose, love, and hope. The triplets had not only changed his life, they had redefined it. And as the sun set over the fields, casting long shadows across the land, Henry realized something profound. Sometimes fate brings unexpected gifts wrapped in hardship. For him, those gifts came in the form of 3 tiny lives left beneath an old oak tree. And together, they had built a home, a family, and a future brighter than he ever imagined. The courtroom was tense as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Henry sat stiffly in his chair, his hands clasped tightly together, staring at the wooden table in front of him. The triplets, Lily, Samuel, and Emma, were safely at home with Mrs. Harper, blissfully unaware of the decision that would shape their lives forever. Every eye in the room was fixed on the judge, who shuffled through papers before finally looking up. After what felt like an eternity, the judge spoke. "This case has presented unique challenges," she began, her voice calm but firm. "The welfare of these children is our utmost priority, and after careful consideration of all evidence and testimonies, I have reached a decision." She paused, glancing around the packed courtroom. Henry's heart pounded so loudly he thought everyone could hear it. The court recognizes the biological connection between Clara and the children, the judge continued. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, and Henry braced himself for the worst. But then her tone softened. However, we must also consider stability, care, and the environment most conducive to their growth and happiness. Mr. Calloway has demonstrated unwavering dedication, not only in providing for the children's immediate needs, but also in fostering a loving home. Furthermore, the overwhelming support from the community underscores his ability to offer them a stable future. Henry barely heard the rest of her words. Tears welled up in his eyes as the realization hit him. He had won. The judge granted him full custody of the triplets, officially allowing him to adopt them. Cheers erupted from the crowd, echoing off the walls of the small courtroom. Farmers clapped each other on the back, teachers wiped away tears, and teenagers hugged one another, their handmade signs now fluttering in celebration. Outside, the townsfolk waiting under the tent cheered wildly when the news reached them. Henry stood slowly, still processing the magnitude of the moment. Social workers approached him with smiles, congratulating him on the victory. He shook hands numbly, overwhelmed by gratitude, not just for the ruling, but for the people who had fought alongside him. As he made his way out of the courthouse, surrounded by well-wishers, he spotted Mrs. Harper holding Lily in her arms while Samuel and Emma giggled happily beside her. Seeing their faces melted away any lingering tension. This was real. They were his family now. Clara, though absent from the proceedings, sent a letter expressing her gratitude. In it, she admitted she had always hoped the triplets would find someone like Henry, someone kind, patient, and strong enough to give them the life she couldn't provide. "You've given me peace," she wrote. "Knowing they're safe and loved means more than you'll ever know." Her words brought both sadness and comfort to Henry. He didn't harbor resentment toward her. Instead, he felt compassion for the pain she had endured. If anything, he hoped she could find healing someday. Back at the farmhouse, the party spilled into every corner of the property. Neighbors brought food, music played softly in the background, and laughter filled the air. Children ran around playing tag, while adults toasted to the new chapter beginning for Henry and the triplets. Someone hung a banner over the porch that read, "Welcome home, Calloway family," its bright colors fluttering in the breeze. For the first time in months, there was no uncertainty, no fear of losing what mattered most. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities. As night fell and the festivities wound down, Henry found himself sitting alone on the porch steps, cradling Emma in his arms. Samuel and Lily slept soundly inside, exhausted from the day's excitement. He gazed out at the fields bathed in moonlight, reflecting on how much had changed since that fateful autumn morning. His life, once quiet and predictable, was now vibrant and unpredictable, but infinitely richer. These 3 tiny lives had saved him from loneliness, teaching him lessons about love, resilience, and the power of community. Henry kissed Emma's forehead gently as she drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, all was right in his world. As the legal battle dragged on, Maplewood transformed into a fortress of solidarity for Henry and the triplets. The townsfolk, who had always been close-knit, now operated as a single unit, determined to ensure that the babies stayed with the man who had become their father in every way that mattered. It wasn't just about supporting Henry. It was about standing up for what they believed was right. Love, they argued, should outweigh bloodlines or societal expectations, and love was something Henry had shown in abundance. Mrs. Harper became the unofficial leader of this grassroots movement. She organized weekly gatherings at Hank's Diner, where locals brainstormed ways to support Henry. Fundraisers popped up everywhere: bake sales, quilt auctions, even a charity tractor pull. Farmers donated fresh milk and eggs, while shopkeepers set aside portions of their profits to help cover court costs. One elderly couple knitted blankets and hats for the triplets, selling them at the town market and donating the proceeds. "We're not letting those babies go anywhere," Mrs. Harper declared firmly during one meeting. Her words echoed the sentiment of everyone present. The teenagers of Maplewood also played a crucial role. Inspired by stories of Henry's dedication, they banded together to create posters and flyers promoting fundraising events. Some even babysat the triplets during weekends, giving Henry much-needed breaks. Emma, Samuel, and Lily quickly became local celebrities, their faces plastered across banners alongside slogans like Team Callaway and Love Wins. The community's energy was infectious, turning what could have been a somber period into one filled with hope and determination. But it wasn't just financial support that poured in, it was emotional backing too. Neighbors visited regularly, bringing meals and encouragement. Teachers from the elementary school offered free childcare advice, teaching Henry techniques to soothe colic or encourage tummy time. A retired nurse named Betty volunteered to stay overnight when Henry needed rest, rocking the babies back to sleep during late-night feedings. Even strangers passing through town stopped by to leave small gifts, a handmade toy, a jar of homemade jam, or simply a note of encouragement. Henry, though touched by the outpouring of kindness, couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. He appreciated the help more than words could express, but he worried about leaning too heavily on others. Still, it was hard to turn down such heartfelt offers. Each act of generosity reminded him that he wasn't alone, that an entire town stood behind him, rooting for his family to stay together. The courtroom itself became a testament to Maplewood's unity. On the day of the final hearing, nearly half the town showed up to show their support. The benches were packed with familiar faces, farmers in flannel shirts, teachers clutching notebooks, teenagers holding hand-drawn signs. Outside, a group gathered under a makeshift tent, praying and sharing stories about how Henry had inspired them. Their presence sent a powerful message. This wasn't just about one man and 3 babies. It was about a community coming together to protect something precious. During the proceedings, Henry sat nervously, clutching a photograph of the triplets. Testimonies came from social workers, neighbors, and even Clara's lawyer, who admitted that her client still struggled to stabilize her life. When it was Henry's turn to speak, his voice trembled but remained steady. "I didn't ask for this," he began, looking directly at the judge. "But these children have changed my life in ways I never thought possible. They taught me what it means to truly love someone selflessly. I can't promise to be perfect, but I can promise to give them everything I have, and to make sure they know they're loved every single day." His words hung in the air, raw and honest. As the judge listened intently, the room fell silent except for the occasional sniffle from the audience. For many, it was impossible not to feel moved by Henry's sincerity, or by the sheer force of a community united behind him. Whatever the verdict, one thing was clear. Maplewood had proven that love, care, and determination could transcend fear and uncertainty. And for Henry, that knowledge gave him strength to face whatever came next. Henry's decision to adopt the triplets was met with both admiration and skepticism. While many in Maplewood cheered him on, others questioned whether a single man in his late 50s, especially one with no prior parenting experience, could truly provide the stable home the children needed. Social workers assigned to the case were professional but cautious, explaining that adoption wouldn't be a simple process. Henry understood their concerns, but he also knew in his heart that these babies belonged with him. He wasn't about to let anything, or anyone, stand in the way. The legal battle began quietly at first, with meetings and paperwork piling up on Henry's kitchen table. The social workers conducted thorough assessments of his home, scrutinizing every detail. Was the house safe? Were there enough supplies for 3 growing infants? Did Henry have a reliable support system in place? Each question felt like another hurdle, but Henry tackled them all with determination. He installed baby gates, child-proofed every corner of the farmhouse, and even attended parenting workshops organized by the county. If they wanted proof that he could handle this, he was going to give it to them. But just as things seemed to be moving forward, complications arose. Distant relatives of Clara emerged, claiming partial custody rights over the triplets. A great-aunt named Ruth stepped forward, insisting she had a legal obligation to care for the children. Their family, she argued during a tense court hearing. I may not know much about raising babies, but blood is thicker than water. Her words stung, not because Henry doubted her intentions, but because he feared losing the children he'd come to love so deeply. The courtroom drama only intensified when rumors surfaced that Clara herself might be considering reclaiming her parental rights. Though she hadn't made contact directly, her lawyer filed motions suggesting she wanted to reunite with the triplets once her situation stabilized. For Henry, this news was devastating. He had spent months pouring his heart into caring for Lily, Samuel, and Emma. To imagine them being taken away now felt unbearable. Tensions ran high, and Henry often found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling. He replayed conversations with social workers, trying to anticipate what arguments might sway the judge. During the day, he threw himself into caring for the triplets, finding solace in their laughter and the way they reached for him with tiny hands. They didn't understand the chaos surrounding them, and Henry was determined to shield them from it for as long as possible. Support poured in from unexpected places. Neighbors who had initially been unsure about Henry's ability to raise the children now rallied behind him. Mrs. Harper organized fundraisers to help cover legal fees, while local farmers donated fresh produce and supplies. Teachers volunteered to babysit during long court sessions, ensuring the triplets' routines remained consistent despite the upheaval. Even teenagers from the high school pitched in, organizing bake sales and car washes to raise money. The entire town seemed united in its belief that Henry deserved a chance to keep the family he had built. Despite the overwhelming support, Henry couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at him. What if the judge decided against him? What if Ruth or Clara won custody? The thought of saying goodbye to the triplets left an ache in his chest that refused to fade. Still, he clung to hope. Every smile from Lily, every gurgle from Samuel, and every sleepy snuggle from Emma reminded him why he was fighting so hard. These children weren't just his responsibility. They were his joy, his purpose, his family. As the final court date approached, Henry prepared himself for whatever outcome lay ahead. He had done everything within his power to prove his commitment to the triplets. Now, all he could do was wait and pray that love would ultimately triumph over doubt. Weeks turned into months, and the mystery of the triplets' origins remained unsolved. Detectives worked tirelessly, following every lead, but the trail seemed to grow colder with each passing day. The blankets the babies had been wrapped in offered no clues, generic, store-bought items that could have come from anywhere. There were no witnesses, no security cameras nearby, and no signs of forced entry on Henry's property. It was as if the infants had simply appeared out of thin air. Henry tried not to dwell on the questions swirling around him. His focus remained on caring for Lily, Samuel, and Emma, who were growing rapidly under his watchful eye. But curiosity gnawed at him. Who could have left them there? And why? He often found himself staring at the old oak tree where he'd discovered them, wondering about the person who had chosen his land as a safe haven for their precious cargo. Then, one crisp morning, an envelope arrived at the local police station. Inside was a handwritten letter, its words trembling with emotion. The writer identified herself only as Clara, explaining that she was the mother of the triplets. Her story unfolded across several pages, each sentence heavy with pain and regret. Clara revealed that she had fled an abusive relationship, fearing for her life and the safety of her children. She knew she couldn't provide for them, not while running scared, not while struggling just to survive. Leaving them on Henry's land had been her last resort. I remembered your farm from when I was a child, the letter read. It always felt like a place of kindness, even though I didn't know you personally. I hoped you'd find them before it was too late. The revelation shocked everyone, including Henry. As he read the letter aloud during a meeting with detectives and social workers, his voice cracked with emotion. Anger bubbled up inside him, not toward Clara, but toward the circumstances that had driven her to such desperation. How could anyone be forced to choose between keeping their children or ensuring their survival? Yet, amidst the anger, there was also gratitude. Clara had trusted him, placing her faith in a stranger to care for her most treasured possessions. The discovery of the letter reignited the investigation, this time focusing on finding Clara. Authorities launched appeals through local media, urging her to come forward so they could offer her support and protection. Flyers were distributed and hotline numbers were shared widely. But despite their efforts, Clara remained elusive. Whether she was still hiding or too afraid to step forward, no one knew. Meanwhile, the news of Clara's plight rippled through Maplewood, stirring emotions among the townsfolk. Some expressed sympathy for the young mother, imagining the terror she must have felt. Others debated whether she should be allowed any role in the triplets' lives after abandoning them. Opinions varied, but one sentiment prevailed. The children deserved a stable, loving home, and Henry seemed determined to provide exactly that. For Henry, the letter brought clarity but also complication. On one hand, it answered many of his questions, giving context to the mysterious events that had upended his life. On the other hand, it deepened his resolve to fight for custody of the triplets. Knowing that Clara had acted out of love, not neglect, softened his heart toward her. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that these babies were meant to be his. They had already become a part of him, woven into the fabric of his daily existence. As winter approached, bringing frosty mornings and shorter days, Henry continued caring for the triplets with unwavering dedication. Each milestone they reached, their first smiles, their attempts to roll over, felt like proof that he was doing something right. The uncertainty of their future loomed large, but Henry refused to let fear overshadow hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to face them head-on. For Lily, Samuel, and Emma, and for the family they had unknowingly created together. As the days turned into weeks, Henry Calloway's life underwent a transformation he never could have anticipated. The quiet rhythm of his days, once filled with the predictable tasks of farming, was now punctuated by the cries, giggles, and constant needs of 3 tiny infants. It was overwhelming at first, especially for someone who had spent most of his life alone. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Henry began to adapt. What started as a sense of duty evolved into something deeper, a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. At first, caring for the triplets felt like navigating uncharted territory. Feeding them was a challenge. They seemed insatiable, their little mouths always searching for more. Diaper changes became a whirlwind routine, with one baby needing attention just as another finished. Sleepless nights stretched endlessly, leaving Henry bleary-eyed but determined. He scored books borrowed from the library and watched online videos, teaching himself the basics of newborn care. Though he stumbled often, mixing formula too weak or struggling to soothe a colicky child, he refused to give up. Each small victory, no matter how minor, felt monumental. What surprised Henry most was how quickly he began to recognize the unique personalities of the babies. There was Lily, the feisty one, whose piercing cries could wake the entire house, but who also rewarded him with toothless grins when she was happy. Then came Samuel, quieter and more observant, content to lie in his crib and watch Henry move around the room. And finally, there was Emma, the smallest of the trio, whose delicate features and soft coos melted his heart every time he looked at her. They weren't just the babies anymore. They were individuals, and Henry found himself falling in love with each of them in different ways. The townsfolk continued to play a vital role in this new chapter of Henry's life. Mrs. Harper visited regularly, bringing not only baked goods but also practical advice gleaned from raising 5 children of her own. "They'll test your patience," she warned with a knowing smile, "but they'll fill your heart in ways you can't imagine." Other neighbors pitched in too, helping with laundry, running errands, or simply sitting with the babies so Henry could catch a few moments of rest. Even young teenagers from the high school volunteered to babysit, eager to lend a hand and get a glimpse of the famous triplets everyone was talking about. Amidst the chaos, Henry discovered something unexpected: joy. For years, he had lived a solitary existence, finding comfort in routine and solitude. But now, his home was alive with noise and energy. Watching the babies grow, even in small ways, like holding their heads up or grasping his finger, filled him with pride. He realized that despite his age and lack of experience, he was capable of giving these children the love and stability they needed. More than that, he wanted to. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound happiness, lingered a shadow of uncertainty. Social services reminded Henry regularly that the baby's future remained unresolved. Temporary custody arrangements would eventually lead to decisions about adoption or reunification with their biological family, if they could be found. Every mention of this possibility left Henry uneasy. The thought of losing the triplets, whom he had come to see as his own, was unbearable. One evening, after putting the babies down for the night, Henry sat by the fireplace, staring into the flickering flames. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of old floorboards. He thought about how empty it had felt before the triplets arrived. Now it was brimming with life and purpose. These babies had awakened something in him, filling a void he hadn't even realized existed. As much as he dreaded the looming legal battles ahead, one thing was clear: Henry wasn't going to let them go without a fight. News of the 3 abandoned infants spread through Maplewood faster than wildfire on a dry summer day. By mid-morning, neighbors were already knocking on Henry Calloway's door, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. Word had traveled quickly, first among the farmers who worked nearby, then to the local cafe where gossip flowed as freely as coffee, and finally across the entire town. Everyone wanted answers. Who were these babies? Why had they been left on Henry's land? And what would happen to them now? Henry, still overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, found himself at the center of attention. The modest farmhouse that had once been his quiet retreat was now bustling with activity. Local authorities arrived shortly after the news broke, parking their vehicles along the dirt road leading up to his property. Officers inspected the area where the infants had been found, searching for clues: a piece of clothing, a note, anything that might reveal the identity of the person responsible. But aside from the blankets the babies had been wrapped in, there was little evidence to go on. Social services stepped in next, sending representatives to assess the situation. They assured Henry that the children would be taken care of, explaining that temporary foster care arrangements would need to be made until more permanent solutions could be determined. However, the thought of handing the babies over to strangers filled Henry with unease. He had only known them for a few hours, but already he felt a deep connection, a responsibility he couldn't ignore. The townsfolk, moved by Henry's kindness and obvious attachment to the infants, rallied around him. Mrs. Harper, the elderly woman who ran the bakery downtown, showed up with baskets of fresh bread and pastries. "You've got your hands full," she said with a warm smile. "Let us help." Others followed suit, bringing diapers, baby clothes, and bottles. Someone even donated a second-hand crib, which Henry set up in the corner of his living room. As the day wore on, speculation about the baby's origins grew louder. At Hank's Diner, locals gathered around tables, swapping theories over cups of steaming coffee. Some believed the mother must have been passing through town, desperate and alone. Others whispered about troubled families in the area, wondering if someone close to home was involved. A few suggested it might have been an act of desperation, a young woman unable to cope with the challenges of raising triplets. Whatever the truth, everyone agreed on one thing: leaving the babies on Henry's land wasn't random. It was deliberate. By evening, the story had reached the local newspaper, and reporters began arriving at Henry's doorstep. Cameras flashed as journalists peppered him with questions. "How do you feel about finding the babies? Do you plan to keep them? What will happen next?" Henry, unused to being in the spotlight, answered as best he could, though his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the babies sleeping peacefully upstairs, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. Despite the whirlwind of activity, One thing remained clear. Maplewood wasn't going to let this incident fade into obscurity. This was more than just a strange event. It was a call to action. Neighbors who rarely spoke to each other suddenly came together, united by a shared desire to ensure the infants received the love and care they deserved. Even those who initially doubted whether Henry, a single man in his 50s, could handle such a daunting responsibility began to see something remarkable in his determination. As night fell and the crowd outside his house thinned, Henry stood by the window, watching the flickering lights of departing cars. For the first time since discovering the babies, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. He didn't know what the future held or how long the community's support would last. But one thing was certain. These 3 tiny lives had already sparked something extraordinary in the people of Maplewood, and perhaps in himself. On a quiet autumn morning, when the air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves and the sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, Henry Calloway began his day like any other. A farmer all his life, he had spent decades tending to his land, a sprawling stretch of fields just outside the sleepy town of Maplewood. His days were predictable. Wake before sunrise, feed the livestock, mend fences, and work the soil until sunset. But this particular morning would be different, life-changing, even. As Henry made his way toward the far edge of his property, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with fresh hay, something unusual caught his eye. Near an old oak tree, partially hidden beneath a mound of straw, there seemed to be movement. At first, he thought it might be an injured animal, a stray dog or perhaps a fox seeking shelter. Concerned, he dropped the wheelbarrow handle and approached cautiously. What he found stopped him cold. Beneath the hay lay 3 tiny infants, no older than a few weeks, wrapped tightly in faded blankets. Their faces were flushed red as they wailed loudly, their cries sharp against the stillness of the countryside. For a moment, Henry froze, unsure if what he was seeing was real. His heart pounded in his chest as he knelt down beside them, gently brushing away the hay to get a better look. The babies squirmed, their tiny fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut as they cried out for attention. Henry's mind raced. Who could have left these fragile lives here? Why would anyone abandon them in such a remote place? Questions swirled in his head, but one thing was certain. He couldn't leave them there. Without wasting another second, he carefully gathered the infants into his arms, cradling them close to shield them from the chilly morning breeze. They felt so small, so vulnerable, yet alive with energy, despite their dire situation. The walk back to his farmhouse felt longer than usual, each step heavy with emotion. Henry glanced at the babies intermittently, marveling at how peaceful they looked when they weren't crying. He noticed subtle differences between them. One had darker hair, another's cheeks were rosy, and the third seemed slightly smaller than the rest. Despite their shared predicament, they were undeniably unique individuals. When he finally reached the house, Henry laid them on a clean wool blanket spread across his kitchen table. Panic set in as he realized he had no idea how to care for newborns. He rummaged through drawers and cupboards, finding bottles, cloths, and anything else that might help. His hands trembled as he prepared formulae, using instructions he vaguely remembered from years ago, when his sister had asked for advice about her own child. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now. As the babies calmed down after their feeding, Henry sat back, exhausted yet strangely fulfilled. There was something profoundly moving about caring for these little ones, even in such a makeshift way. He stared at them, wondering about their story. Who were their parents? Why had they been left on his land? And most importantly, what was going to happen next? Little did Henry know, this unexpected discovery would not only alter the course of his quiet, solitary life, but also bring the entire town together in ways no one could have imagined.